Exercise 3. If G is a group not equal to the trivial group, that means if G has at least two elements, at least something that is different from the identity, and this has no non-trivial group, non-trivial subgroup, no non-trivial subgroup, then show that G must be finite of prime order. Okay, if G is different from the trivial group and it has no non-trivial subgroup, then G must be a finite group. G cannot be infinite, and it also should have prime order. So according to this exercise and according to the last corollary to Lagrange's theorem, such a group must be a cyclic group. So let us see how this can be solved. What we will do here is that we will try to see whether we can apply the previous exercise, the result of the previous exercise here. In the previous exercise, we considered the intersection of all subgroups of the group which are different from the identity elements. Different from the trivial subgroup. Here, what is the case? Here, the only non-trivial subgroup of, the only subgroup of G other than that trivial group is G itself, because there is no non-trivial subgroup. The only subgroup of G which is not equal to E is G. So if you take the intersection of all such subgroups, now that the collection of all such subgroups in this case has only one element, which is G itself. So the intersection is also G, which is not equal to the trivial group. So the condition is true and that we had in the previous exercise. So by the previous exercise, our group now will have all its elements of finite order. Hence, by the previous exercise, every element of G is of finite order. From this, we have to somehow first of all conclude that G must itself be finite. Contrary to that, we suppose G is infinite and try to arrive at a contradiction. Suppose G is infinite. Now we are choosing an element A that is different from the identity element in G. We can do that because G anyway is not the trivial group. Since A is of finite order, We have already concluded that every element in G has finite order. So as such, A has finite order. The cyclic subgroup generated by A, whose order is equal to the order of this element generator, is finite, is a finite subgroup, and as such it will be a proper subgroup of G, because according to our supposition G itself is infinite, so it cannot be equal to this one. Also, since A belongs to the cyclic subgroup generated by A and A itself is not the identity, we have this one also. This is a proper subgroup of this cyclic group. But now see what we have. Now this subgroup of G is neither equal to G nor equal to the trivial group E. So it is a non-trivial subgroup of G, which directly contradicts the hypothesis that G has no non-trivial subgroup. But then this is a non-trivial subgroup of G. A contradiction to the hypothesis. So that means our supposition is wrong. So our supposition is wrong, that is G must be finite. That means order of G is a positive integer. Also note that since G is not the trivial group, so order of G has to be greater than 1. So we already have proved that G is a finite group. We must have order of G to be a positive integer greater than 1. But we already know that any such positive integer is either a prime number or a composite number. The exercise asks us to show that it's a prime number. We will prove this by contradiction, by supposing that it's a composite number. Okay. Suppose order of G is composite, which means it will have a non-trivial factorization. That is, it will be of the form Nm, where N and M are integers both greater than 1. Composite numbers always have such a factorization by definition. For example, 6. This product does not show the compositeness of 6 because one of the factors is 1. However, 6 is composite, and that is because there is one such factorization where both the factors are greater than 1. If you take a prime number, this will not be possible. Such a non-trivial factorization will not be there. Okay. Now again we are going to choose an element. Okay, now choose an element A not equal to E in G, any non-identity element which we know exists because order of G is greater than 1. Then what about this integral power? Integral power of an integral power. By one of the rules of exponent, this is equal to a to the power nm, which is equal to nm is nothing but order of G. So by the second corollary to Lagrange's theorem, this is equal to identity. Right. Now we don't know whether a to the power n itself is identity or not. We don't really know. It may or may not be identity. Suppose it is not equal to identity. If a to the power n is not equal to identity, then as an element its order of a to the power n, okay, will be greater than 1. Then order of a to the power n is greater than 1, but at the same time, because its mth power is equal to identity, so the order will be less than or equal to m. Okay, and m itself is less than order of G. Okay, am I getting it correctly? Let me just see the hint. One hint I have written here. Yes, m is strictly less than order of G. M is strictly less than order of G because if m is equal to order of G, then n will be equal to 1, which contradicts this choice that both m and n are greater than 1. So now you look at these inequalities. Hence, the cyclic subgroup generated by a to the power n will have this order, which is strictly greater than 1 and strictly less than order of G. That means this cyclic subgroup will be a non-trivial subgroup of G, again contradicting the hypothesis. Hence, this is a non-trivial subgroup of G, a contradiction to the hypothesis that G has no non-trivial subgroup. So that means this cannot be true. A to the power n cannot be different from identity. It has to be equal to identity. So we must have a to the power n equal to identity. But now we are going to apply a similar sequence of arguments with this equation in place of this equation. Since A is originally not equal to identity, we have again order of A. This time we are considering the element A instead of A to the power n. Order of A should be greater than 1 because of this inequality, and because of this equation order of n should be less than or order of A should be less than or equal to n, which itself is strictly less than the order of G, because m is not equal to 1. If this is equal to order of G, m will be equal to 1, contradicting this thing that both are greater than 1. But then the cyclic subgroup generated by A has order this, which is strictly greater than 1 and strictly less than order of G. So that's why this is a non-trivial subgroup of G. Again, contradicting the hypothesis. So now we have run out of choice, and this situation is happening because of our supposition that order of G is composite. Hence, our last supposition is wrong. That is, order of G must be prime, and that concludes the solution. Okay, so here also the situation is not straightforward at all, but it as I have already discussed this topic, it's difficult to say exactly what we have to do in a solution, but you keep on struggling with different ways of getting at what you want. Eventually you will get the solution, or if you are highly unlucky, you may not get the solution also. Anyway, we move on to the next one. Next one is not that difficult at all. So it has two parts. Part A is this: if H is a subgroup of G, and A belongs to G, A is any element in G, let this symbol AHA inverse denote the set of all elements that look like this, AHA inverse, where H is coming from the subgroup H. Okay. Show that AHA inverse itself is a subgroup of G. And part B asks this: if H is finite, what is the order of AHA inverse? Okay. Solution part A. First of all, it's obvious that AH A inverse is non-empty because H is a subgroup, H is non-empty, so H has some element. So you take that some element and form this product A, that some element times A inverse, that is an element in AH A inverse. So AH A inverse is non-empty. Clearly AH A inverse is non-empty. Let H1 and H2 be two elements in H. We are taking two elements in H because we ultimately have to take two elements here, for which we will need elements of H, because the elements in this set look like that involves elements of capital H. Then what do we get when we take this product? This is one element times another element, AH2 A inverse. This is equal to, you can see that A inverse and A will give us identity, which will vanish in between H1 and H2. So without writing too many steps, we can just simply write like this. And because of our general associative law, we can bracket such a product in whatever way we want. We have chosen to keep this H1 and H2 together. Since H1, H2 belongs to H, and why is that so? Because H itself is a subgroup of G, so the product of these two elements in H will be an element in H. We have AH1 A inverse times AH2 A inverse, which is this element is again an element of that form for it to be in AH A inverse. Okay, so we have shown that product of any two elements in this set is again in that set. Also, what is the inverse of this? By our rule for taking inverse of a product, we have to take inverses of the individual elements and we have to take the opposite order. So this will be equal to A inverse whole inverse times H1 inverse times A inverse, which is nothing but A inverse whole inverse is A, H1 inverse A inverse. Since H1 inverse belongs to H, again because H is a subgroup and H1 belongs to H, so H1 inverse belongs to H. We have AH1 A inverse whole inverse equal to I'm running out of ink, I need more. So this is equal to AH1 inverse A inverse again belongs to AH A inverse. So that's it. We have shown both the things we require in order to say that AH A inverse is a subgroup of G. Hence, this is a subgroup of G. Now next, the part B asks us to show that if it asks us the order of this subgroup. What is its order if H is finite? We claim that it has the same order as H. For that, what we will do, we will establish a one-to-one correspondence between the two sets H and AH A inverse. That will prove not only that AH A inverse is finite, but it has the same cardinality as H. Define this map. F from H to AH A inverse by this HF. Okay, keeping the notation intact, the strange fixation of Hertzstein of using functions, of writing functions to the right of the argument. So we also write like this is equal to AH A inverse. Clearly, I have already said this before many times, but again I am going to repeat. When you have defined a map, you have to, before you go for showing anything about the map, you have to first of all make sure that the map is well defined, which means that if two inputs are equal, the outputs should also be equal, which in this case is obvious, because if you take H1 equal to H2, then AH1 A inverse is also equal to AH2 A inverse. So that's why we are not writing anything much here. We are just simply mentioning clearly F is well defined. Now next we show that F is one-to-one. Let H1 and H2 be two elements in H such that H1F is equal to H2F. Then H1F is AH1A inverse and H2F is AH2A inverse. What will you do now? You use the cancellation laws, both the cancellation laws, and so by the cancellation laws, in G, H1 is equal to H2. So if outputs are equal, then the corresponding inputs are also equal, which tells us that F is one-to-one. Thus, F is 1-to-1. What about onto-ness? You take any element here, that element is of this form, so the input from which that element is coming is H. Also, so that also we are not going to write in detail. Also, obviously, F is onto. Thus F is a one-to-one correspondence. So if H is finite, then so is AHA inverse, and its order is equal to the order of H. So this completes this solution.